The slam of the front door rang out like a final judgment in the quiet Austin suburbs as Robert Thompson jabbed a shaking finger toward his son. "You are no longer welcome in this house, Leland, and do not ever come back here, you hear me?" Leland stood frozen in the living room, his suitcase half packed at his feet, the words slicing through him sharper than any knife. His mother, Margaret, sat crumpled on the couch, tears streaming silently down her face, but she offered no defense, only a broken whisper of his name that died in the air. His sister Emily turned away, her arms crossed tight, while his brother Jake smirked from the corner, muttering how he always knew Leland was different. The scent of Thanksgiving turkey still lingered, mixing with a heavy tension that had exploded the moment Leland had spoken the truth about Grant over dinner. He had driven the long miles from New York City back to Texas, full of cautious hope, thinking his family might find a way to understand after years of hints and silences. But the instant he said the word boyfriend, the room had turned to ice and then to fire. "How could you do this to us, Leland?" his father roared, his face flushed with fury. "We raised you right, gave you a good Christian home, and this is how you repay us, by choosing that kind of life." "It is not a choice, Dad," Leland answered, his voice calm, even as his chest tightened with the storm inside. "It is who I have always been. Grant and I love each other, and he is the best thing that has ever happened to me." "Love?" Robert spat back. "Do not talk to me about love. This is wrong, and I will not have it destroying our family name. Pack your things and get out tonight." The drive to the Austin airport blurred into streaks of highway lights and unshed tears. Leland gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles ached every mile, pulling him farther from the only home he had known, yet closer to the one person who had never asked him to be anyone else. Grant had begged to fly down with him for support, but Leland had insisted on handling it alone, believing his family deserved that private moment of honesty. Now regret burned in his throat as he replayed the scene, the disgust in his father's eyes, the silent betrayal in his mother's tears. At the gate, he dialed Grant's number, his hands trembling. "Hey, baby," Grant answered on the first ring, his voice warm and steady like an anchor in rough seas. "How did it go?" "It went exactly like I feared," Leland said, swallowing hard. "They threw me out," Dad said. "I am no longer his son. I am on my way to the airport right now." "Come home," Grant replied without hesitation. "I will be waiting at arrivals. We will face this together, I promise." The flight to New York felt endless. Leland staring out the window at the dark landscape below, his mind racing through memories of childhood in Austin, the strict church Sundays, the sports teams his father pushed him into, the endless pressure to be the perfect son. He had met Grant 2 years earlier at a design firm in Manhattan, where Leland worked as an architect and Grant handled client visuals. Their first coffee date had stretched into dinner, and then a walk along the Hudson where Grant had shared stories of his own coming out in Seattle and how his family had embraced him. That night when Grant kissed him under the glow of street lamps, Leland felt something click into place, a sense of belonging he had chased his whole life. By the time the plane touched down at JFK, the exhaustion weighed heavy, but the sight of Grant waiting with open arms melted some of the pain. They held each other tight in the middle of the terminal, Grant's hand rubbing soothing circles on his back. "You are safe now," Grant murmured into his hair. "This is your home now with me." That night in their cozy Brooklyn apartment, overlooking the East River, Leland poured out every detail, his voice cracking at the memory of his sister's averted gaze, his brother's mocking laugh. Grant listened without interrupting, then pulled him close on the couch. "You made the bravest decision today," he said softly. "It hurts now, but you chose honesty, and that is something no one can take away." Yet inside Leland, the conflict tore at him. He loved Grant with a depth that scared him, sometimes the way Grant's laugh lit up rooms, the way he remembered small things like how Leland took his coffee or needed quiet after long workdays. But the void left by his family ached like an open wound. How could the people who had bandaged his scraped knees and cheered at his graduations turn their backs so completely? The decision to come out had come with a price he was only beginning to calculate, and as he fell asleep in Grant's arms, he wondered if the cost would ever stop rising. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the apartment windows, casting warm patterns across the hardwood floors as Leland woke to the smell of fresh coffee. Grant stood in the kitchen, humming softly, while flipping eggs, his presence a steady calm against the chaos still swirling in Leland's mind. They ate breakfast at the small table, talking in low voices about practical things like updating his resume and reaching out to old college contacts for job leads, since the firm in Austin where he had consulted occasionally would no longer be an option. "I can cover the rent for a few months," Grant offered, squeezing his hand across the table. "You focus on healing and finding something here full-time." New York has plenty of architecture firms that would kill to have your talent. Leland nodded grateful, but the guilt gnawed at him. He had always prided himself on pulling his own weight, never wanting to be a burden. Now, with his savings tied up in the family business, he had walked away from the rejection felt like starting over at 28. Later that afternoon, they walked to Central Park, the crisp fall air, carrying the scent of roasted nuts from vendor carts. They found a bench near the Bethesda fountain and sat close, Leland resting his head on Grant's shoulder as leaves danced around them. For the first time since the blow-up, he allowed himself a small laugh at one of Grant's jokes, the sound surprising even him. "See," Grant said, turning to kiss his temple. "Moments like this are why we fight for what we have. Your family may not see it yet, but you are not defined by their rejection." The words soothed, but doubt lingered. That evening, a call from his sister Emily came through. Leland stared at the screen, debating before answering. "Leland," she said, her voice tight. "Mom has not stopped crying since you left. Dad is still furious, but maybe if you apologize and say it was a phase." "It is not a phase, Emily," Leland replied, his tone firm, though his heart twisted. "I am gay and I am in love with Grant. I will not lie to make them comfortable." The call ended abruptly, her sigh heavy with disappointment. Leland set the phone down and turned to Grant, who had overheard. "She is trying in her own way," Grant said, pulling him into a hug. "But you do not owe them a performance of who they want you to be." Over the following weeks, Leland threw himself into job interviews, navigating the city's competitive scene while battling the inner voice that whispered he had ruined everything. At one firm, the interviewer asked pointed questions about his personal life, the subtle judgment clear in the raised eyebrow when Leland mentioned his partner. He left the meeting deflated, but Grant's encouragement at dinner that night reminded him of his strength. They cooked pasta together, laughing as sauce splattered, and for a few hours the world felt right. Yet late at night, when Grant slept, Leland lay awake, replaying his father's words, the finality in them echoing like a sentence. The decision to stay true to himself had cost him his roots, and as winter approached, the isolation pressed heavier, the social prejudice he faced and small comments from old acquaintances back home filtering through social media adding to the weight. Grant noticed and planned a quiet evening in with movies and takeout, holding him close through the tough moments. One afternoon, they returned to Central Park, this time with a picnic blanket and sandwiches, the sun warming their faces as they talked about the future. Leland felt a spark of hope watching Grant feed ducks, the simple joy reminding him why the pain was worth enduring. But the family pressure mounted with another call from his mother, begging him to come home for Christmas to talk it out. He refused gently, but the guilt lingered long after hanging up. Each choice to protect his love with Grant carved deeper lines of loss, and as the days shortened, Leland wondered how much more he could endure before the internal battle broke him. The job offer came on a snowy Tuesday, an entry-level architect position at a respected Manhattan firm with a salary that would ease the financial strain. Leland accepted immediately, the relief washing over him like a wave as he shared the news with Grant over dinner at their favorite Italian spot in the village. They toasted with red wine, Grant's eyes sparkling with pride. "You did it, baby," he said, raising his glass. "This is the start of our real life here together." The weeks that followed brought a rhythm to their days, Leland diving into projects, designing modern lofts that reflected the freedom he craved, while Grant handled client presentations with his usual creativity. Evenings were filled with shared walks through Brooklyn Heights, the city lights reflecting off the river, as they discussed everything from work frustrations to dreams of buying a small house upstate one day. Yet beneath the surface, the family silence gnawed at Leland. No calls came from his father, and the few texts from his sister were short and guarded. He tried to focus on the present, but flashbacks to childhood family barbecues where he had hidden his crushes haunted him during quiet moments at the drafting table. One weekend, Grant surprised him with tickets to a Broadway show, the energy of the performance lifting Leland's spirits as they held hands in the dark theater. Afterward, they strolled Times Square, the neon lights bright against the night sky. "I am so proud of how you are handling this," Grant said, stopping to face him. "Most people would have crumbled, but you are building something new." Leland smiled, but inside the moral dilemma raged. Was cutting ties the right choice, or should he keep reaching out despite the hurt? The societal whispers followed him too. At a networking event, a colleague made an offhand joke about gay architects, the room laughing politely, while Leland forced a smile, his stomach turning. He confronted the man later in private, his voice steady as he explained the harm, but the incident left him drained. Grant listened that night over wine, offering reassurance, but also challenging him gently. "You do not have to fight every battle alone," he said. But you also do not have to forgive on their timeline. The tension peaked when Leland's brother Jake posted a vague social media rant about family betrayal, the comments from relatives piling on with coded disapproval. Leland read them in silence, his hands shaking, before blocking the thread. The betrayal stung deep. Jake, who had once defended him in school, now turning his back for approval. That weekend they escaped to a quiet cafe in Soho, talking for hours about the price of authenticity. Leland decided then to limit contact further, the decision bringing a mix of freedom and sorrow. As spring approached, their bond grew stronger, a weekend trip planned to California for a work conference, turning into a romantic getaway, the anticipation helping Leland push forward. The choices kept coming, each one carrying consequences that shaped the man he was becoming, and with Grant by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The California trip began with a flight west, the Pacific Air greeting them as they landed in San Francisco. The conference kept Leland busy during days, but evenings belonged to them, exploring the city hand in hand. One afternoon, they drove down the coast to a secluded beach near Big Sur, the sun high and warm as they walked barefoot, the waves whispering against the shore. Leland felt the weight lift watching Grant skip stones, the laughter echoing off the cliffs. They spread a blanket and talked about the future, Grant's hand in his, the moment pure and healing. "This is what matters," Grant said softly. "Us building memories no one can take away." Back in New York, the high faded when a call from his mother came late one night. Robert had suffered a mild heart scare, she said, her voice pleading. "He is asking for you, Leland. Please come home just for a visit." Leland hesitated, the internal conflict tearing at him. He loved his mother despite her weakness, but the memory of his father's rejection held him back. Grant advised caution, suggesting a short trip if it brought closure. Ultimately, Leland booked the ticket, the decision weighing heavy as he boarded the plane. In Austin, the hospital room felt suffocating, Robert pale in the bed, but his eyes still hard. "You came," his father said gruffly. "But do not think this changes anything about your choices." The words cut deep, yet Leland stayed the afternoon talking with his mother in the hallway. She hinted at family secrets but clammed up when pressed. The visit ended in another argument, Jake accusing him of causing the stress. Leland left feeling more lost, the betrayal from his brother complete, when he learned Jake had shared private messages with extended family. Back in New York, he poured the pain into work, late nights at the firm, the tension rising as a promotion loomed, but required social events where his relationship drew subtle stares. Grant supported him through it all, planning quiet dinners and reminding him of his worth. One evening, after a particularly tough day, they sat on the roof of their building, the city spread below. Leland confessed his doubts about ever reconciling the moral weight of family loyalty versus self-respect pressing on him. Grant held him close, the decision to prioritize their love solidifying in that moment. As summer heat settled over the city, the pressure from Texas calls increased, his sister sending guilt-laced texts. Leland blocked some, the trade-off painful but necessary for his peace. The awakening came slowly. He realized his identity was not defined by their approval, and with each step forward, the path with Grant felt clearer, even as the cost of lost family ties lingered like a shadow. The DNA test kit arrived in a plain envelope, Leland ordering it after the hospital visit to understand his father's heart issues for his own health records. He swabbed his cheek and mailed it off, not expecting much beyond medical insights. Weeks later, the results pinged on his phone late at night while Grant slept beside him. The match showed zero biological link to Robert Thompson, the percentages clear and undeniable. Shock froze him as he read the details, his heritage tracing to an anonymous donor, listed only by number. Grant stirred, sensing the tension, and listened as Leland explained, his voice shaking. "They used a sperm donor because Dad was infertile all these years, and they never told me." The revelation upended everything, Leland spending the next days in a fog of questions. He confronted his mother over the phone, her sobs confirming the truth. "We thought it was best," she whispered. "Your father felt ashamed, so we hid it." The moral dilemma intensified. Should he demand more answers or let the past stay buried? Work suffered as he missed deadlines, the firm noticing his distraction. Grant suggested therapy, the sessions helping unpack the layers of identity crisis, the feeling of not belonging anywhere now explained yet still raw. A trip back to Texas for answers turned confrontational, Robert denying knowledge at first, then admitting the choice but blaming Leland for turning out gay. "You got it from that donor blood," he shouted, the hypocrisy glaring. Leland left the meeting, reeling, the betrayal of silence from his family deeper than the initial rejection. Back in New York, he researched the donor registry, finding a match to a man named Victor Hale in California, a prominent gay rights advocate and businessman who had publicly searched for his donor children after coming out later in life. The connection felt surreal. Victor had donated as a young man before fully accepting his own sexuality. Contacting him via the registry brought a cautious email exchange, Victor expressing joy and no judgment about Leland's life. The decision to meet loomed, Grant supporting, but warning of emotional risks. Meanwhile, family pressure mounted, his mother begging for forgiveness, his brother threatening to expose more if Leland pursued the bio father. The trade-off weighed heavy. Choosing truth meant risking the fragile threads to his raising family. As fall returned, Leland booked a flight to California, the internal battle reaching a peak, the awakening that blood did not guarantee love beginning to take root. San Francisco greeted Leland with cool fog lifting as he met Victor at a waterfront cafe, the Golden Gate Bridge framing the scene. Victor, a tall man in his 50s with kind eyes, extended a hand, his smile genuine. "I have waited years for this," he said. "Knowing I have a son who is living openly makes me proud beyond words." Their conversation flowed for hours, Victor sharing his journey from anonymous donor to activist, the struggles and triumphs mirroring Leland's own. He offered support, no strings, a job opportunity at his firm, and stories of other donor siblings. Leland felt seen in a way his Texas family never provided, the heritage truth filling gaps he never knew existed. Back in New York, he shared every detail with Grant, the excitement mixed with grief. "This changes everything," Leland said over dinner. "But it does not erase the years they raised me." The family learned of the meeting through Emily, the calls turning desperate, his mother confessing the full story. Robert had insisted on secrecy to maintain the image, fearing questions about his manhood. The hypocrisy stunned them all when Victor reached out directly to Robert, expressing no anger, only a desire for peace. The confrontation via video call left Robert speechless, his face paling as Victor calmly stated the facts. The man they shunned for gayness carried the heritage from a gay donor they had chosen. "We made mistakes," Robert admitted, finally, his voice breaking. "But you are still our son." Leland listened, the dilemma sharp: forgive and risk more pain, or hold boundaries and lose the only parents he knew. Grant advised caution, the relationship tested when Leland considered a short reconciliation visit. They argued briefly, Grant fearing it would reopen wounds, but they reconciled with a walk in Central Park, the familiar bench bringing comfort. Work flourished with Victor's connection, a new project landing, the success bittersweet against family turmoil. Betrayals continued, Jake spreading rumors at a family reunion, but Leland chose not to engage, the decision freeing yet lonely. As the holidays neared, the choices accumulated, each carrying the price of authenticity, the path forward clearer with Grant and Victor, but the cost to his original family a constant ache. The explosive family meeting happened in Austin, the living room tense as Leland, Victor, and Grant faced Robert, Margaret, Emily, and Jake. Victor spoke first, his calm presence commanding. "I do not want to replace anyone," he said. "But Leland deserves the truth and the chance to know all parts of himself." Robert sat silent at first, then erupted, the shock of the heritage truth rendering him momentarily wordless, his face draining of color. "You hid this from me all these years, Margaret," he turned to his wife. "And now our son is gay because of it." "It was not because of it," Leland interjected, his voice strong. "It is who I am, and Victor has shown me there is no shame in it." The arguments raged, hours of accusations and tears, Margaret pleading for forgiveness, Jake storming out in denial, Emily caught in the middle. Leland faced the ultimate dilemma: forgive the years of rejection for the sake of the mother who had loved him in her limited way, or protect the life he built with Grant and Victor. The trade-off felt immense, losing the illusion of blood family for the reality of chosen bonds. Victor offered no pressure, only support as they left the house, the door closing with a softer finality than before. Back in New York, Leland processed the awakening, the realization that heritage explained but did not define him. A work crisis tested him further, a client pulling out after learning of his personal story, the societal prejudice flaring, but he stood firm, the decision strengthening his resolve. Grant proposed a quiet commitment ceremony, just them and close friends, a moment joyful amid the chaos. They accepted Victor's invitation for Christmas in California, the beach walk there a highlight, the sun and waves symbolizing new beginnings. Yet the pain lingered, calls from his mother, bringing guilt, Leland setting firm boundaries, the price of peace. Confrontations with his past continued in therapy, the moral questions of right and wrong evolving as he chose self-respect over obligation. The new year brought clarity, Leland thriving at work with Victor as a mentor, his relationship with Grant deeper than ever. They celebrated a small anniversary at the California beach, the same spot from earlier, the hand-in-hand walk, now filled with plans for a future house and perhaps adoption one day. The family contact dwindled to occasional texts from Emily, the partial reconciliation, limited to holidays with strict rules, no pressure on his identity. Robert sent a single letter expressing regret, the word halting, but sincere, leaving Leland to decide the final boundary. He chose measured forgiveness for his mother's sake, but full independence, the decision controversial even to himself. Victor became a steady presence, visits blending family and friendship, the heritage truth, no longer a wound but a bridge to understanding. Betrayals faded as Leland distanced from toxic ties, the awakening complete. He was not broken by rejection, but shaped by it into a stronger man. Grant stood as the constant, the love that had carried him through every storm, the shared moments in the city and on trips, the foundation of his new life. The sacrifices had been real, lost relationships, strained family ties, but the rewards, peace, authenticity, and chosen family outweighed them. As they watched the sunset from their Brooklyn rooftop, Leland turned to Grant, the city humming below. "I never thought the truth would set me free like this," he said. "But it did, and I would choose us every time." In the end, one must ask, was it right for Leland to build boundaries with a family that raised him once the heritage truth emerged, or should he have offered unconditional forgiveness regardless of the pain they caused?